education is the growth of the human being. Teachers need to become human educators, which machines cannot do.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for the first episode of our second season of Element is Everything. I'm Terry Novacek, and today we hear from award winner and author of a multitude of articles and dozens of books on education, Dr. Yong Zhao. I came to know Dr. Zhao and his work more than a decade ago when he spoke at the University of San Diego. What made him memorable to me was hearing someone so high on the education totem pole speak of personalized learning in the same way that I think of personalized learning. My colleagues and I walked out of the event that evening giving each other high fives. We were so excited that someone with such credibility was speaking our language. It gave us hope that customized learning plans were not just for outlier educators and homeschooling parents, that all students could have access to a meaningful and truly personalized education. Like a fountain, an education that fills learners up, giving them a sense of purpose, value, and encouragement. Well, fast forward 10 years, and even though we are at a place and time in history when our youth should have the most flexibility to capitalize on their strengths, interests, and passions, with plenty of time to reflect, recognize, and celebrate their uniqueness, we are still seeing outdated methods draining our youth, such as packets of rote learning assignments and mandatory screen time of little to no value. How can we encourage rather than control learning? What role should assessment play, and what can it look like? What role should technology play? What is the role of today's educator? Dr. Zhao has some interesting answers, so let's dive in. So you make a comment in your most recent book, assessment is not to evaluate, but to provide information to facilitate progress.
Right.
Can you explain that a little further?
If you think about, let's not even think about assessment. Think about you give a grade to a student. If your students wrote an essay, and then you want the students to improve that essay, as soon as you give a grade to that essay, learning kind of stops. The students will not read the comments, they will not revise because they've done. You've evaluated them. So they have this evaluation mindset. You are evaluating me. I've done my job. Let's move on. So that's why I advise a lot of English teachers, if you want students to improve, don't give them a grade. Tell them what needs to be improved, how you can become better. The same, so students, younger kids may not get this. Older kids get a very strong sense of evaluation. They're going through the cycles and cycles of evaluation. Then you tell me I'm a good student, a bad student. Did I do well? Did I do bad? So that's the kind of mentality. Instead, any assessment today should be about what's missing, what's good, how can I improve? Remember, we treat education as discrete points. Year one math, year two math, year two reading. That's not like that. The whole education is one thing, is the growth of the person. I think schools have been really fragmented by curriculum, by this piece of knowledge, that piece of knowledge, not by students' growth.
I would agree. And so along those lines of assessment, I mean, so many assessments, so little time. When we sit down with our students to meet them where they are, what do you feel are the priority skills? I mean, we all know about the standardized assessment for, reading and writing and math, but there's social emotional competencies, there's motivation and character and creativity and tech skills and critical thinking. I get exhausted just thinking about it. What do you feel are the priorities as we're bringing kids back and engaging?
Well, you really have, whenever we think about a student, we're really thinking about at least two parts of the skills. One is what I call the floor skills and knowledge. One is called the ceiling or flying skills. So we confuse that. A lot of the writers, like 21st century skills, they confuse that. So first of all, every person is a member of a society. Every person should have some basic knowledge and skills. That's the floor. So that's probably, I would say, the most basic things are you are a reader, you can read. Can you do basic math? I'm really talking about very basic. And how about civics? Do you understand? Do you understand how to respect others? Basic, history. So things like that. That's really about participating as a member of a society. Then has to do with flying or sailing skills. What makes you, Terry, successful? That's very different. What makes students successful is very different. So I would define that as something that's strength-based. That's you. So you construct a unique profile of different skills and knowledge. You may be good at writing, but are you interested in writing? If you're good and interested in writing, does it serve a purpose with somebody else? So it's not really about creativity, curiosity. They all vary. Individuals, like we can all be creative, but can we be productively creative? That has to do with your knowledge and skills. But then knowledge and skills compete with each other. If you spend more time on math, you cannot spend the same time on sports. If you spend more time on sports, you cannot spend the same time on arts. That's just a very simple thing. So then you need to say, okay, if my interest is in art, then you need to know, are you really good at art, or are you just wasting your time? Really, like, we can teach art. We can teach everybody to do art, but you cannot teach everybody to become a Picasso. But today we need a Picasso. We need everybody who is in that certain domain to be really good. So the flying skills is a unique combination of who you are, what knowledge you have, what creativity you have, what personality you have. So it's really you. And that's not prescribed, or cannot be prescribed.
How would you define success?
Well, success, I really mean what I call really two things. You can call three things, maybe. One, you're able to make a living. Just doesn't matter what you do. You're able to make a living. That means you are doing something that's valuable enough for somebody to pay you. They can pay you a lot. They can pay you tiny, but something, whatever that thing is. So that's just one area. Second thing, that is, you are a successful member of a society. That is, when you move into an apartment or a house, nobody kicks you out. It is social, the basic social things, right? So you do not go to offend, break laws, all those things. And third, you have to be happy. I think today you have to be happy. But happiness comes from creating value for others. Feel a sense of yourself. I think you talked to Michael Waymeyer about self-determination. That is, you are valuable. That is, you are relatable. That is, you can have autonomy. And that goes back to my argument about creativity and entrepreneurship, is that you can create value for other people and the bigger world. That's genuine happiness. And if you can do that, you can make a living. If you can do that, you'll have good friendship, good social relationship with others.
I know a lot of your work centers around technology. And I love the title of your one book, Never Send a Human to Do a Machine's Job. And when it's funny, when I say that title to people, I can see them physically react to that. So I think that's a great title because, of course, now people want to read it. And you're not saying humans will not have jobs anymore. You're just saying humans don't need to do the work of machines and they don't need to be machines.
That's correct.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, it's people always been debating about machines and humans. First of all, we invent technology to replace human beings, not entirely replace human functions, right? So if it's a dangerous place, we send machines to do that. If it's if human beings cannot get to Mars, we build things to do that. That's the first thing. It's supposed to replace human functions. Now, if you take that idea to schools, there are a lot of jobs that teachers do that they shouldn't do. They don't need to do. Like correcting 100 copies of the same homework. Why do you have to do that? You mark, oh yeah, you choose the A, choose the B, choose C. Why do you have to do that, right? That's one thing. Another thing is there's a lot of things human beings cannot do in schools. If you're teaching, let's say, foreign language, you want to bring in native speakers, and there are videos do better than you. There are better actors, better actresses in the whole thing. You cannot do that, right? And we've already allowed in scientific experiments, we allowed machines to do a lot of those things. So the whole idea is to liberate teachers from being teaching machines into human educators. Knowledge can be acquired fairly easily today. If you're on YouTube, on whatever, Khan Academy, knowledge is easy. So I'm arguing, I just published a new book. It's called Learners Without Borders. The whole idea is that technology can truly bring you really any learning you want today if you try that, but it does not bring you education. Education is the growth of the human being. Teachers need to become human educators, which machines cannot do. That's what I was thinking about. You relieve the boring, the impossible, the mechanical, the routine to machines. By human beings, you become the human educators. You understand the student's interest. You understand the student's strength. You know students' passions. Then you curate technological resources or community resources for the students. You help them grow. When they're sad, you are there. When they are questioning themselves, you are there. It's a human being. So I call the best teacher is probably like a life coach. A life coach with you. You probably remember when you were in school, you might be lucky enough to run into one or two teachers who really cared about you as a human being. They did not care about you getting a good grade, getting test scores. They said, Terry, you're a human being. What are you thinking? What are you worried about? What would you like to do? How can we help you? That is something that machines cannot do.
Right. Yeah. Connect.
Yes.
Connect with each other. So you talk about technology as the children's machine, not the teachers. When children own their learning, they can determine how to use tech to support it. I know there are a lot of parents and educators get a lot of anxiety over a statement like that because of where that technology could possibly take their children.
Well, that idea really did not, I think, came from me. It came from really Seymour Papert, the MIT professor who passed away, who wrote a book called The Children's Machine in the 1980s. The idea is this, is that children needs to interact on their own. I was actually talking this morning with someone else about how parents and teachers try to control. It's not a good thing. It is to encourage children to develop a sense of competency, a sense of self-direction, a sense of self-management of their devices. So, a machine, especially let's think about computer, a digital device that can connect with other people. That's social media, that's also gaming, that's also labs, so many things. It's a children's play field, and the children need to develop competency with that. And teachers, of course, you can have your own machines for yourself, but children interact within that space, and they develop new competencies, new skills. They develop software, develop websites. They can write, they can do art, they can do so many things, but they need that autonomy, that freedom to do that.
Do you have suggestions of anything that maybe you've seen that has worked? One of the concerns around giving children freedom with technology is that we know bullying has been around forever. And for some reason, it seems like bullying is easier through technology. You don't have the face-to-face. Any suggestions for how to...
First of all, that's not entirely true.
Okay.
Actually, people sometimes find bullying in person is easier. Actually, COVID has really liberated a lot of kids who used to be bullied on campus in schools. A lot of kids said, now I'm here with me. I can ignore you. I don't have to deal with you. I think it's for the most important thing for me. I just think bullying is just people have nothing to do. If everybody's engaged doing their own thing, you don't see bullying. Bullying is when kids are bored. They got to find ways to take joy out of punishing others. I mean, what's wrong with that? Human beings are not supposed to do that. But I grew up in a village in China. I got bullied all the time, because they were bored. But on the other hand, again, I think people have to learn how to deal with the bullying. We have to learn how to do it. I really don't believe in, you can protect that. It's like reading pornography. Some people read it, some people don't read it. But if you want to hide it, it's impossible. So what I'm talking about is children develop the competency and the conscientiousness and the confidence to try to drive that. I don't say anything like bullying, you can protect this. I just think it's delivering the wrong message to say, oh, you cannot bully, you got the policy. That doesn't solve the problem. The real problem is that you have to do it. Another thing is that one or twice or three times, bullied kids do not necessarily become the worst kids. They actually learn to master how to handle social relationships. If you're behind them, if you're helping them to grow out of it, just to, like my children, they go to school. I think we're just talking. They were just home because now they're older. They were bullied. They were not bullied. It's the same thing. Another thing I always say, okay, life is just not fair. You have to learn how to deal with it. You have to be the one to lead a justice society. You have to be the one to lead, to help with others. But doesn't mean everybody will do the same for you. So you have to grow out of it. You have a Montessori school. I love Montessori. One of my children went to Montessori. The one of the problems I always joke about is Montessori needs to go with technology. They need to get into the more technology, more modern things.
Yeah, we have those conversations in our organization all the time. Just because it's not there, I think it's because Maria Montessori is 100 years old.
You happen to be born at a time without social media or digital devices.
So you mentioned students at this time need a warm, friendly, welcoming educational experience instead of one that checks on them, and that money should be spent on students learning instead of testing students. And I see this tying in with the bullying. I agree with you. Bullying comes from boredom. I also believe it comes from, I feel bad. So if I can make you feel bad, that makes me feel better. What ways do you see being the answer to creating those warm, friendly, welcoming educational experiences?
Well, human beings are intentional and purposeful. We look for meaning. If you think about bullying, yeah, exactly. You say, I'm bored. I don't have anything else to do, so I just go find meaning in bullying somebody. It doesn't really feel good. So I think the big thing is, can a school create a context within which every child can find something that's meaningful to do? When I go visit schools, I always ask about, what are you doing with your bottom 25% students? Do they feel engaged? Do they feel they want to come? Do they feel they're doing something meaningful? I think every school can do that. Every school can create the opportunity for children to be creating value for somebody else, to do something for other people. That somebody else may not have to be in your school. They can be in other countries. I mean, your school, for example, could participate in a big project I'm doing. It's called HIP, Human Interdependence Project. We're looking for schools, for students to co-create from different schools around the world, to participate in, to co-create products that demonstrate human beings are interconnected. If your students are busy creating those things, they won't be bullying. They don't need to be assessed. Right now, another reason I wrote that is that assessment costs a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really do much. Like you kept assessing, what do you get out of it? And children, children would like to score high when they can score high. If they can never score high, have a good score, how do you feel? If every time you take a test, if every time you get checked, you're the worst kid, you go to special ed, you're lifted out, we're retaining you. How do you feel? You're basically getting kids to be disengaged. So why do we do that? And also when children come back, even from COVID, they are going to be different. They've always been different. Schools have always punished poor kids. We've always done that. But remember, poor kids are not necessarily poor. I don't mean money. I mean ability. They can be great in some other areas. If you watch the Olympics, not every kid is a good kid, necessarily a good kid in a traditional school, but they're great in some areas. You have few kids who are good at everything, but not entire population. So that's why I say, don't assess them. Create opportunities so every student can find something meaningful to do. That something may or may not be in the curriculum, but something meaningful that they like to do.
Right. You talk about family engagement, and, we've gotten, in my opinion, the shift has just gotten so strong as far as the responsibility of schools. It used to be we just wanted all the kids to have a level playing field and be able to read and write and do arithmetic. And now it's everything else. And we just keep taking more of the responsibility off of the parent. But we also know that children spend more time with their parents. And during COVID, with people being home together so much, what I've seen is that's been good and bad. What have been your observations?
Well, I think, first of all, parents are a huge population. Some parents are very engaged. Some parents cannot engage. They are too busy. They are having to work 2 jobs, 3 jobs. Some parents are in migration. Some parents are struggling with themselves. I would like to see parents become more involved with their children's education. And there are a population of parents who are, from my experience, who are very engaged, who are overly engaged, who are, helicopter parents. There are parents who buys sideways into University of Southern California or Stanford. They got very engaged parents. So it's a huge population. So I can't comment on that. But more important about parental engagement is that students, I just want to give you a new idea. Students can change parents. We used to run experiments in northern Thailand, in poor countries. Students become the knowledge person in the village. They take the idea from school, they go back to transform. We still have a lot of migrant families like that. Children are the bridge. They speak English, They connect with America, they bring knowledge and ideas back home. So I want you to think about that is yes, we like to have more parental involvement, but at the same time, I think we should use students to transform our society. Because now if you always rely on parents, I think old generation always govern the future generation. But we want the future generation to change the old generation. That's how paradigm shift can happen. So that's I can tell you this. I'm an educator, but I am very, very little involved with my children's education. I mean, their schooling. I'm involved with their education. We chat a lot about things. We talk a lot about things. For example, we try to take them out for travel to, I think, one of the countries, and the school said, no, you can't take your kid out. I said, no, I am. So that's, so we have different conflict, different views, because I think global travel is perhaps more important than a week's class.
Definitely.
So that's the, I think with the parents, you get what you get. And we encourage them. We want them to be involved. But at the same time, yes, children don't spend enough time in school. We can't afford to have that school. But, we have what we have.
Well, okay. And so for this program, we always hope that somebody listens to an episode and walks away with maybe some new strategies or insight. Whether I'm an educator or a parent, what do you feel are things that, to your point of educate the child, what do us adults need to do to give autonomy?
Children taking the responsibility for making a living is really important. My children, I think, I never woke them up in the morning for school. They got to come wake us up, me and my wife. They got to get breakfast ready, then we can take them to school. That's very simple. But many parents struggle getting their kids up and trying to, so they got an alarm clock, but you can say, okay, the kindergarten, first grade, if they miss a day, that's no big deal, but they want to go. Remember, they are excited to go. So you want them to get in the habit. You don't want to go wake them up, Yeah. Another thing, even if you want to manage your kids playing, okay. So if your children are watching too much TV, playing too much video game, so many parents say, well, you can only do 15 minutes, 30 minutes a day. So you manage that. No, you say, okay, I'll give you 3.5 hours for a week. You can manage it. Then the children can learn to manage that. They learn to say, oh God, I got only 3.5 hours. I have to divide myself. I can borrow one, I can play 15, half an hour a day, or I can play, 3.5 hours in one day. So you want to do that. I would say give them the opportunity to make mistakes, to fail, but they understand what's a good expectation. So they understand it. So give quite broad expectations. Don't micromanage. If your kids say, okay, they're not turning the homework, what are you gonna do? Say, okay, you want to say, well, for what reason? Maybe homework is boring. Maybe you want to negotiate with teacher. I don't want the homework. Or if the children said, okay, they did the homework, but they forgot to turn in. They're not interested in this. You say, okay, that's fine. Doesn't matter. I know my kids have kept a lot of homework in their school bag, and they're old now, but I still found some homework, some stuff like it's all right, And so you want to be very careful with what do you expect your children to become, a decent human being. So I think go high level rather than go low level. High level children can make mistakes. They learn from the mistakes. If you go too low, if you micromanage too much, you're bound to fail. They won't have a chance, because they're not internalizing the idea. Instead, they just following the rules.
Do you believe that a parent's job is done once their children have become adults?
Well, we should be thinking that way. I'd like to think that way. And as parents, this is human nature because, our genes are passed on into our future generations. We keep worrying about them. But we shouldn't, I think children just pass through our lives. They're not our toy. They're not our
Possession.
belongings. They're not our possessions. Exactly. I think it's and you maintain good relationship with them, but they have a life.
Whether you like that life that they're living or not.
Exactly. That's another thing. Some parents are so harsh on their children, but as soon as their children are gone, forget about it, right? As soon as children said, I'm always asking parents to think, you work so hard, you try to you should do this, do this. What if your child just one day told you, I don't want to do any of this? What are you going to do? Really, what are you going to do? There are children who are like that, right? What are you going to do? So that's what you want to work with them. You do not want to force them. Plus, we also, as parents, we should always self-reflect on our own knowledge, on our own experiences, because everybody's knowledge and experience is limited. You don't know. Like, for example, I know a lot about education, but there's so many things I don't know. I cannot make a judgment.
Well, I really appreciate the time to connect with you and your willingness to share your experiences and your perspective on education and learning. Is there anything else that you feel would be beneficial for parents and educators and decision makers to know as we are still navigating this pandemic?
Well, I just want to share one thing, which I wrote in the article in the Build Back Better. I think it's parents, policymakers, teachers, school leaders, whatever you're looking for in a child at this moment, you should go beyond the immediate outcomes. Immediate outcomes like, what can you do in math or in reading? Really look at long term. Are your children engaged? Are they interested in doing something? Do they want to take the responsibility for doing something? Those are much more important for a person. You can always make up your little content, but you cannot make up for confidence. You cannot make up for independence. You cannot make up for a sense of responsibility for others and the world.
Well said. Thank you very much, Dr. Zhao.
You ask great questions and you read very well. Thank you so much, Terry.
Thank you. And so our challenge for the week: follow Dr. Zhao's advice and think beyond immediate objectives. So maybe you're thinking about expectations of your child, a student, or even yourself. Identify what feels draining. Now take that and look long term. What does it look like now? How can you encourage a mindset or practice that, like a fountain, creates energy? How can you capitalize on your strengths and interests? Imagine yourself always growing, never bored, and creating value for others. Imagine yourself in your element.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Element is Everything. If you found anything in this podcast worth knowing, please share it with a friend, a teacher, a business leader, or other decision maker. If you haven't already done so, be sure to subscribe wherever you are listening now to be notified of future episodes. We appreciate your suggestions and feedback, which you can provide through the Element is Everything website under Contact. Or you can simply email elementiseverything@myelement.org. Our hope is to help listeners discover the path to their element, who will then help others do the same. Live life to the fullest. Live life in your element.